Hi guys, so today's video is going to be my mid-month wrap-up, or at the very least, when I'm filming this, it's roughly the middle of the month, and so far, I'm doing pretty good with the start of the new year. I have completed 3 books and then started 3 books. I had this desire to not read multiple books at once because I really do prefer not doing that, and that went straight out the window. I'm going to start with the ones that I am currently reading and then move into the ones that I have completed. So I'm currently reading Best Served Cold by Joe Abercrombie, The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead, and then I'm actually reading an arc for an anticipated release called Hall of Smoke. I'm going to start with that one because that one I've seen a lot of people be excited about. I'm not all that far into it just yet, but thus far I am loving it. It is a kind of Viking-inspired fantasy story, and I was so surprised at how engaged I was so quickly. I definitely feel like the stakes are very high right away. Currently, the world feels quite brutal without feeling like it's shock value or overdone, over the top, which of course is subjective anyway, but in my taste, I don't feel like it's tons of gore and violence just to be like, look how dark it is. So I'm really enjoying that one so far. I really think the beginning is very strong. There are certain events that take place at the beginning where if it occurred later in the book, of course, you would know the characters more and thus the events would be more emotional. But even with the short amount of time that I've been with the main character, I still felt for them at the beginning. So I'm really excited to see where it goes. Fingers crossed that the enthusiasm I have right now for this book stays as I continue to read and it doesn't go downhill. Next, we finally have Best Served Cold. I am listening to this one on audiobook. For those that don't know, Stephen Pacey, the narrator for Joe Abercrombie's books, is phenomenal. Arguably some of the best narration you're going to hear out of all of fantasy audiobooks. It's opinion-based, but oh my gosh, I've never come across someone who enjoys listening to audiobooks who doesn't like Stephen Pacey's narration. So I'm really excited to be back with him. And I am not all that far in, but already I feel like this one is moving. And the things that occur, just like with Hall of Smoke, the things that occur at the beginning are very much making me feel for the characters. I want revenge on their behalf. And I just felt like with First Law trilogy, it took so long to care for me with that story because it's so character driven. And I love character driven stories, but that one, there's basically no plot initially, and it feels very aimless for quite a while. And then once you get to know the characters, then that determines whether or not you will probably care about the story. I don't know too many people that were like, I was really gripped by this amazing plot for First Law. But ultimately, I didn't love the conclusion to First Law. There were certain parts of First Law I didn't love. This one, I am so excited for because I already care so much about what's happening. And it's just started, and I know that he's going to make me care about these characters even more as the story progresses, or maybe I'll be feeling guilty about caring about them. One of those two things. Either way, so exciting to be back with Joe Abercrombie. Everybody who said Best Served Cold is even better than First Law, I'm trusting you, and currently I'm believing it because thus far I would say that is true. The other one that I've started is The Underground Railroad. This one, so with the other two, I don't mind reading the arc because that one is digital, and then I'm listening to Best Served Cold. So there's kind of almost like a different format. So I don't mind having those two going on at the same time. This one I did not intend to put down and then pick other things up simultaneously, but this one is not a book that I feel, despite it being quite short, it's not a matter of should be read quickly. It's more of just for myself. I don't want to read this quickly because it is such a heavy story, and it's difficult to read in that it's very tragic and horrifying. So the setup is, what if the Underground Railroad was actually an underground railroad, and you follow someone who is a slave, and it's terrible. I mean, not the book. The subject matter, of course, is awful. But the writing style is interesting because Colson Whitehead, I'd heard this of the Nickel Boys, but with Underground Railroad, I'm finding this to be somewhat true as well, where the writing is somewhat detached from the characters. And I find initially myself thinking, okay, well, probably because you see initially with the character that anytime she shows herself as human, then bad things tend to happen because they're viewed as property. So I thought that the detachment was supposed to be kind of a representation of the character themselves and their detachment from their human side, if you will. But I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think that might just be Colson Whitehead's writing style, because we also shifted to someone else who is basically the epitome of evil. They are just a terrible, disgusting human being. And I think that that is more metaphorical. I think it's more of a representation of themes with a lot of our characters rather than actual characters the way you would find in a lot of other books, which there's nothing wrong with at all, but it does make it the kind of book that you sort of have to sit with and take your time with, I think, anyway. So this one, I'm doing just that. I'm taking my time with it, but I think it's really difficult for the subject matter in general for this to be called enjoyable, but as of right now, it's hard to say my feelings on it. It's almost the kind of book that I feel like should be read in a classroom where you have discussions surrounding it and maybe someone smarter than me who can kind of point out specific things and be like, this is what this represents. Those are my current reads. Now to the books that I have completed. I do have reviews for all of these and some vlog footage, so I'll have that linked in the description bar if you'd like to see more dedicated content around them. But I'll go ahead and start with the one that I reviewed the most recently, which would be Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. Thank you so much to everybody who said that they feel like even if you don't care for Uprooted, still check out Spinning Silver, because I ended up really enjoying this book and I didn't care for Uprooted. There are some people who enjoy both, but they're very different stories, despite both being fantasy standalones. Both, obviously, they're written by the same author, so there are some things about her writing that I think are present in both books. For example, the folklore elements of the story, the way that she incorporates them. Strangely, I also feel like she has almost a theme of people coming together despite religious backgrounds, which is a very interesting thing to have present, because they take folklore elements and peoples of our own world and they kind of blend historical fiction and fantasy together. She draws a lot from her own parents and their backgrounds, and so this one, I really enjoyed the use of, strangely, first-person point of view, because every single character that you get, which you actually get a fair amount of point of views in this one, is first-person, and you don't get their names every time you switch point of views, which is a little aggravating. It takes you out of the story a little bit, because it takes a sec for you to figure out who's who, but her ability to write the characters with such distinction meant that you figured it out. I mean, also context clues of what's happening, but they all had really distinct personalities, and the prose itself was different when you were with different people. So there's one character who, I hate to say, is more uneducated, but essentially, and the way they rationalize things and think through things, I feel like she wrote them extremely well. The bleakness of this world means that the hunger and the desperation and the just trying to fulfill basic needs are shown really well. But the story, for those of you that are like, what is this book even about? So we have a character who ends up, their plotline is somewhat intertwined with a fae plot line, and they are tasked with turning silver into gold. They are supposed to do this 3 times, and then if they do, they're to be basically a fae queen, and they have no desire to be a fae queen. They're like, I don't want any of this. I just want to live my life and help my family, and that's it. And their life is intertwined not just with the fae, but with other individuals as well. I really enjoyed this one. I think it's a fantastic atmospheric read. If you are in the mood for something cold, this will do it for you. I really enjoyed it so much. I feel like a broken record at this point, but I really liked this book. On surface level, I would say The Bear and the Nightingale felt similar. It's both of them are atmospheric reads. Both of them are Central Eastern European folklore inspired. The writing style of The Bear and the Nightingale, which is by Catherine Arden, though, I would say is quite different from Spinning Silver. This one is very, very formal in its writing, and I would say the prose itself is a little more beautiful. I have said multiple times now that Spinning Silver felt like I was experiencing a fairy tale, whereas this one feels like I'm being told a fairy tale, like there needs to be a fire going and it needs to be dark outside. That's kind of the vibe of this one. The cold that I was talking about feeling with Spinning Silver, it's like that times 1,000 with this one, because it's like, oh, the weather isn't so great right now. Hopefully we don't all die this winter. It's just really intense. And the fae elements of this one, they're also different. I feel like the other one has a little bit more of what you see in more modern fae stories. Not that the trends are modern, but just that currently we are seeing the whole, they don't want to give you their true name, they're kind of tricksters, and that vibe, whereas in this one, it's kind of darker, and I would say even creepy. It is almost like bordering on fantasy horror at times. So I think this one is definitely a darker read. Everybody always said it's a great book for the cold, but I also would add that I think if you want to pick this up in the fall, that works as well because of the kind of scary folklore elements. I did like our main character in this one, Vasya, but again, you aren't really experiencing the story alongside Vasya. It's more of like you're reading about her and all of the family stuff going on with them and the way that the people view her. That is kind of a theme in both of them as well. They're almost like, oh, is it a witch kind of a vibe? But this one is just much more formal. Both of these, though, I feel like both of these would make fantastic adaptations, maybe a mini-series or something, because the magical elements are they're not flying around. It's not superhero type magic. It's definitely more of a softer magic system in both. A system's probably not even the right word, but a softer magic. And I feel like both of them would be fantastic adaptations. If you want to pick up one of those, but you only really can read one right now, I would say if you are more of a character-driven reader, I would pick up Spinning Silver. And if you're somebody who really likes beautiful prose, I would say pick up The Bear and the Nightingale. But anyway, on to the last book. We have Atomic Habits. So I'm trying to read more nonfiction this year. I thought this would be a good one to pick up at the beginning of the year because, as it says on the cover, tiny changes, remarkable results. So the idea is it's trying to help you learn how to utilize your habits to get the results that you want. So in the book, it's basically saying there's no such thing as a bad habit. There are just habits that can have bad results or good results depending on what you want for yourself. And he breaks everything down into the smallest of concepts. So I would say for the first chunk of the book, a lot of what I was introduced to happen to be things that I'm quite familiar with. So if you don't know, I have a background in music education. That's actually what I went to school for. So I'm very used to the idea of, because I played violin, starting somewhere where you feel like the end goal that you want for yourself, which is like, I hope I can just make a decent sound and play pretty things on this. That's the end goal, but it takes years. It takes years to be able to do something like that. So I do feel like a lot of what was discussed at the beginning of the book was something I personally kind of already knew and had some familiarity with. Whereas the second half, I feel like kind of broke down more of practical ways to implement these sorts of concepts into your everyday life. So I have been trying to do that. There are a couple of things I've been trying that I do feel like are working. I think the biggest takeaway for me from this book was things that if I were to tell you, oh, like here's an example of something he says, you'd probably be like, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. But it's more of the awareness of it, being aware and therefore being able to kind of track your progress and seeing what's working, what's not, the accountability of yourself. I don't know how helpful it would be for other people, depending on your background and the kind of work that you've done. I think it could be extremely beneficial, but I also think for some people it could be something they're kind of already aware of, but it's a short enough read. I think that there's probably something to take away from this for everyone. So if you're looking to read something just to maybe get some ideas of how you can be more productive, I would say go ahead and give this one a try. I have so many other books that I'm planning to try and pick up this month. So hopefully when I'm doing my end of the month wrap up, I'll have all sorts of other books to discuss. If you want to see what I'm hoping to pick up, I'll have my TBR for the month linked down below. But anyway, let me know how your reading is going so far this year. Hopefully wonderfully. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day and I'll see you all later. Bye.